All right. Our next presenter is an IT consultant who acts as the Zookeeper maintainer for Linux Conf AU 2012. That's Zookeeper, the wonderful conference management system that we used on this conference too. Linux Conf AU was held in Ballarat in January. In this talk, Duncan Macneil will be sharing tips and tricks from his collection of Python Lifesavers. Please make him welcome.
Thanks very much. I've got a lot to cover, so I'm going to either speak really quickly or skip every third word. I don't know which is better. A little bit about me before we get started. There is a bit of a continuum. People who are happy enough just to be able to place a call on the left, and people who are not satisfied until they can make every call in the universe. I've placed a little red X here. Particularly in this room, I feel as though I'm way down this end in terms of my technical prowess. But that's actually a good thing, because that allows me to be incredibly opinionated and look down at a great height on things. So if I say something in the course of this talk like Java is rubbish, just pass it off as he doesn't know what he's talking about, right? It's unsubstantiated. So being this non-technical guy who does a fair bit of Python stuff around from time to time, I can kind of relax about the Python, whether or not it is a real language or scripty. I hear developers talking about, you can't use Postgres and Python. They're not real. Oracle and Java is the way to go. Meanwhile, I'm quite happy because I don't have to report to a boss or anything like that. I can do things at the command line. I can do things in Python like this. And for instance, having finished Linux Conf volunteering, the famous quote being volunteering is the worst kind of slavery. I wanted to know if I'd be too burnt out to do my talk at PyCon. Date time minus time delta 211 days. I've got enough time to do a talk. Stuff like this, using Python as a scripting language. I can't remember who made this quote. It's very famous, probably everyone knows, but all significant programming is hacking, right? Because if you're not hacking, if you're not experimenting like this, you're probably configuring in a framework, right? And if you are doing a lot of repetitive, same stuff, boilerplate code over and over again, then maybe you haven't found the right framework yet, or maybe you're not doing stuff at a high level enough. Because all the significant stuff you should be doing should be experimental, and there's a good chance it won't work the first time you try it. Well, that's what I believe anyway. Just before I leave this very simple date time example, my first life-saving tip would be find a single point to do your date time stuff from. See it quite common, people do, they use now in a database as things being inserted. So there's one point of checking the time. They use a bit of Python date time stuff, or they might even use the operating system, right? So 3 sources of time. People think, time's the same everywhere you go, right? I did. I'm old enough to have done Y2K testing, sailed through Y2K testing. Beautiful, not a problem in the world. Sydney Olympics comes, every system falls over because no one can agree whether in Melbourne is it daylight saving because Sydney is, right? So pick one point for your dates and times. I'm a little bit more radical. I say don't even store it in date format in the database. I don't trust databases that much with my dates and times. I actually convert them to strings and convert them back on the way out. That's how extreme I am. About one point for your date and time. Who's seen this? Can I have a show of hands? Who's seen this trick? Okay, for those of you who haven't put your hand up, this is probably, worth the price of admission alone. So it's a little trick, and for those of you who have seen it, you've probably looked at it and gone and tried it at the command line and gone, it works. What happens is you go to a directory on a computer, you type Python -m simple HTTP server. The -m flag basically says, take the module and actually just run it. Okay, and that serves the current directory by default on port 8000, right? Now, for those of you who have tried it at the command line, see that it actually runs up a web server and you can browse to that directory and see the files, and done that, it works. Consider how useful it can be to get you out of a bind. And if you keep that if you write that down somewhere or keep it in the back of your head, one day, somewhere, probably 3 o'clock in the morning, you'll be sitting in a server room going, why can't I just get this frickin' file from this machine to this machine? I don't have keys, I can't transfer them because I don't have auth proof, I can't install this software. Try that on the command line. Is it secure? No. Is it multi-threaded? No. But to counter the is it secure, you'll be piping any attempts to connect into a file. You can check that file and know you were the only one who downloaded a file. And obviously you'd copy something into a directory. So let's have a look at a real world example of that. Don't worry if you can't read this from the back. I just wanted to point out that it is useful for more than just experimenting. This is a little pet project of mine. When you start up an Amazon server, you can paste bash script into the user data thing and it'll run that bash script as root. This is a kind of an emerging field known as infrastructure as code, right? You have your code, you have the machine that you want to set up by basically configuration. You post it in there when you start up. So here's a script that installs a Moodle install. Some of you in the room will know what Moodle is. It takes a fair while for the install to finish. So what we do is jump down into a directory, just push a straight HTML file down in the directory and serve it. And you'll see it's got this meta equiv refresh content too. So when you go to the Amazon server, even before you've got a web server installed, it's going to show up and respond on port 80 because I've used the optional. You can put a number on the end of that little Python -m simple HTTP server 80. So that's the standard port. I go to the new Amazon server and it's going to say, hey, we're loading Moodle, we're installing the database, all this kind of stuff. Then at the end, we kill the Python process and then we start the real web server. And by that time, you've done another meta refresh and you're in your Moodle install. So handy tip. And these sort of tips, using scripty things to kind of get you out of a bind, is really handy to know and do and learn in Python because Python's everywhere. Something I found recently, I think it's supposed to be pronounced replete, as in the internet is replete with examples. So if anyone's played with a very famous JS fiddle, where you can put in some JavaScript, get a URL instantly and share it, this is JS fiddle for Python and Lua and things. Check it out sometime, or check out the slides at the end and have a look at these. Increasingly, we're getting better performance for Python on Android devices. And this drives me crazy, okay? I may have said in the introduction that I think Java's rubbish. But if you can implement Python in Java, it actually shows that, the language is capable. They just didn't write it with humans in mind, Which, by the way, even if you've seen the other trick, Python isn't always installed by default on every server, right? But Java usually is, right? So if you've got the Jython jar just sitting as a file somewhere, you can fire up Java -jar, Jython.jar -m, simple HTTP server, and you're serving over port 8000. So life gets easier. You have all these little kind of tips and tricks and things you can do with Python. But Python is very, I guess, from my point of view, very text-oriented. You do stuff and you manipulate things and text comes in and inputs come out. And so this is a really simple example just showing what replete looks like. And I've chosen a scenario where for 5 days in a week, I've got 10 groups and I want to split them some signage up that puts half of the groups into the Mason room and the other into the Berkeley room. Very, very simple, right? The trouble is when you're given a task like that, and I highly recommend whenever you've got something like that, don't do it by hand or use Excel. Use your Python skills and exercise them. Try this stuff at the command line. The trouble is your output, someone's going to have asked you to do something with this. Go in and register me a room request for each of these or something like that. And the trouble with that approach is, yeah, I can generate all that, but I have to do something. And the problem is that life itself doesn't come with an API. So let's assume, and just note my eye twitching a little as I say this, let's just assume that someone wants you for some weird reason to come up with that list of all the different days of the week and split into 10 groups in Berkeley room and Mason room, and they want you to put it into PowerPoint, right? Make me a PowerPoint slide with all those things, so we're going to print those out. I'm like, well, can't I just do it as a PDF or something, because I can pipe my output into a PDF generator? No, I want a nice PowerPoint, because I know a PowerPoint and it's portable, I can edit it, right? Now, some of the more technical guys amongst you would probably jump into something like a a Windows W32 COM interface and try and manipulate, the underlying thing. I wouldn't recommend doing that because you'll spend more time doing that than you would to actually do this. So this is where Sakuli comes to the rescue. Anyone here heard of this project, Sakuli? Okay, so the one-line web server didn't surprise me. It amazes me. It astounds me that this project isn't better known. It's a simple little idea, but it's a phenomenal paradigm shift for people who want to get stuff done. We talked about a Thomas Kuhn book about scientific revolutions and paradigm shift. This, I think, is a paradigm shift because it does one little trick and it does it really well. Here's my script, highlighted in blue, days of the week, all this kind of stuff. And then down at the bottom, and this is a Jython project, by the way, so it interprets the Python at the top end. And you'll see there's a little click and a little image there, and then type, which is basically another click and type command, and it's using pictures. So Sakuli is a project that allows you to script, but take screenshots in your scripts and check against the current screen, does the screenshot or fraction of a screenshot exist? And if so, I can interact with it, right? So it looks as though this is a useful tool because I can somehow insert screenshots in here and have it click. But the really cool thing is, when I actually go to insert one of these click commands in, you see it's got a little photo icon in there. What it does is minimize the editor and brings you up in a thing where you can actually select on the screen. So I select new slide, and this is where I want to click. So I'm going to click right in the middle of the beautiful Microsoft ribbon there, right in this middle there, okay? And the smart thing is, it's got OCR built in. So it actually takes that little image and converts the name of it to new slide PNG because it's detected that the words new and slide are in there. So that's cool already. And it runs as documentation as well. So I've used this not just to make things, but actually run unit tests. And it also works as documentation as well because the name of the file is instructive and it actually shows you what it's going to do. Then when you replay it, so I've got a little iteration, it's basically saying, click the next slide, and then click the action and type the text, right? So now anything with a GUI is instantly has an open API for you to attack. Now think what that means. It is really awesome. This Sakuli project, it's MIT project, it's open source, it runs on Mac OS, it runs on Linux, it runs on Windows, and it's got this slow motion replay mode as well. So if you want to run like scripted demos and you want to run it on a repeatable pattern and you want to record it, turn it on in slow motion mode, and it has a fuzzy searching mode as well, so which I'll explain in a moment. But effectively what it does is it's running over my script and it has that bit where it says click new slide, so it actually searches the whole screen to match that image. And when it finds the image, it goes up there, it circles it when it's in slow motion mode, and just circles it, so I'm about to click here, and then it clicks it. And then it comes over and it says, okay, new slide. And you can see it's got about 13 slides through here when I took the screenshot. So now there's an even greater reason to use those kind of scripty elements of your Python projects and hook them up to the world as though everything had an API. Now the fuzzy searching bit. When it said click new slide, I didn't add any extra parameters, I just added the image. This is what I'm looking for on the screen. If I put a comma and put a second parameter in there, I can actually define how certain should I be that I've captured that image. So there are people who've been playing around with Sakuli, and they picked up a teddy bear, and they put teddy bear in the webcam, right? And then they go, I want to test for the presence of teddy when I put the teddy into the webcam, and I'll give it a fuzziness level. And they've been playing by moving that fuzziness level up and down, and you've got kind of a recognition framework there. And people are doing amazing things with Sakuli, and I can't recommend it enough. So I'm changing topics here. The other thing that I think is kind of cool when you are used to using Python at the command line, hacking things, experimenting with things, is a framework that allows you to do web applications, but do them just as though you're kind of experimenting on the command line as well. So I've been in search of this kind of thing, and I know there's a lot of emphasis on Django, there's a lot of emphasis on pylons and or pyramids as it becomes known. But I particularly like Web2Py. If no one here has checked it out, I strongly recommend that at least you go to Web2Py and read the documentation for it. I've got no affiliation with the project or anything other than I'm a user of it. But as I read through the documentation, I found myself nodding all the way through. Because everything they've done for you, they've done right, and they haven't forced you to do it that way. But you choose to do it that way anyway because they do it right. And in particular, they've got this thing called pluginwiki, which is just a plugin for it, right? It's meant to be the do-all, do-everything wiki. And it provides a wiki-like interface, and it allows public and private pages like a wiki you'd expect, but it also allows these 3 levels. So the first is like a traditional wiki. You can add in text, images, audio. The second level, you can also include widgets and components. So these are pre-written bits that you'd probably trust a seasoned web user to use. And then the last version you can just use straight Web2Py code. So what does, Python. So what does that look like? So there's a little bit more about this. You can choose between having markmin or HTML, WYSIWYG, so you can make the wiki part really quite simple. Then there's a collection of widgets which are kind of self-document and they can be embedded as you go, which helps for people who have got a certain amount of technical ability but not so much. And then it's got a set of special pages which allow you to do things like metacode and set up the menu for the thing and customize databases and things like that. Add tables to databases or ensure that tables exist. So what does that actually look like? For widgets, you basically go into the wiki builder and there's a list of predefined ones, and you select the thing, fill in a little table, and what you get back is some little wiki code which you can paste in and use for things like maps, comments, aggregators, pie charts, search boxes, slideshows, star ratings, tag clouds, all that kind of thing. So if you're in the habit of needing to take an idea and build an application out of it really quickly, consider using something that already has. This is like batteries included for the web. You can pull something out, you can experiment with the idea. Again, is embedding Python code in a wiki secure? Will it perform well? Well, I don't know. I can't answer that question. I suspect not. But what it does allow you to do is prototype so rapidly that you can discard your bad ideas quick. And that's my definition of success. Discard the bad ideas quickly. So here's my now famous Berkeley Mason Room, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, all the way through the week. To implement that in Web2Py is simply to go and add a wiki page and just throw your Python code directly into the template and run it. And by the way, it imports for you. Imagine above this line, there's a whole lot of imports for data layer abstraction. So you can access a database if you connected one, for time and date functions, for a whole bunch of stuff that's just useful out of the box. Authentication roles based. But in this case, I can just throw in my Python code and have it run, and here instead of print, I've got a heading level 2. I can choose a role for which this page is accessible. Probably people at the back can't see this, but just trust me, I'm pointing at a box that says role. There's a change log, and just like any good wiki, it keeps a history of the pages as well. I've got 10 minutes, so I'm going to race through. So I've chopped and changed during this presentation, but what I've tried to, hit as a recurring theme is, if you ever find yourself doing something over and over again, as a template mode, all of us as developers know, spend your time finding ways to take stuff that you know you can automate and automate it faster so that you don't have that decision between, should I actually type out 100 values and then put it into PowerPoint, or should I learn a way to do that so I become like a more powerful human? And the other idea is experiment with stuff often and early and discard bad ideas, and that makes you much more effective than getting everything just perfect and building tiny little layers that'll get you a very kind of slow way in a very slow time. So it's very opinionated, this presentation. It's been rather brief. I want to do some demos if I have some time. Yeah, that's basically the essence. Any questions before I jump into a... Oh, actually, I might actually just quickly, because I think we've got 10 minutes left on the preso, rather than think. I'll just quickly jump into Sakuli, because I just think that's one aspect of this thing that I just couldn't resist doing a real live demo. And of course, this won't work. 5 minutes. Good. So just bear with me. I thought I had it open. Okay, so here's my my script. I'll take out the click here. Let me take the whole line out, and I'll just hit, and I'll just go to PowerPoint again, and I'll just do a new one. And let me just show you what happens when I hit this. So I'm in an IDE. I can use any Python here. It's just basically a Python interpreter built on top of Python. So what it's going to do is dim down the screen. I select my new slide option. That's what I want to click on. And again, I can give it a fuzziness rating. And you'll notice that there's a find and find all. So I can actually have, if there's a dozen checkboxes on the screen, find all the checkboxes and do something with them, check them all. Clicks and drags options, all that kind of stuff. The other thing I wanted was type on something. So again, it's just the same thing. I want to type in a particular, whoop. This is the thing, never try a live demo. I'll just do that again. It'll switch back for me. Sakuli. What I wanted to have first was this. I don't think it's going to let me switch out of new presentation. There we go. So the other thing I want to do then is just hit my type, and I want to type here, comma, my text. Does that look about right? And let's just run this in slow motion mode and see what happens. Isn't that neat? Isn't that just... The first time I actually downloaded this and did this, it was just so nice for me to think that this was possible, and now anything with a user interface is kind of open for me to hack. And this is increasingly important for people. If anyone knows about URL lib and they're kind of posting forms and setting up things on the web by manipulating RESTful APIs, what's happening, and you'll see this happens with Twitter and other accounts, is you'll get blocked eventually. The people will actually get fed up with you manipulating the REST APIs. So what happens in a lot of frameworks now is you can't automatically just post by visiting URL or doing a RESTful thing. You actually have to do kind of either simulate a browser or actually use a browser, and this is a way to get around it. So I'll take questions while this is running actually, because it kind of, and it is running in slow motion mode. That's not an indication of performance. This is just the mode where it shows you what it's doing. I'm going to click here, then I'm going to click here, then I'm going to type. Questions?
Sorry, you're just looking at the Sakuli stuff. Does it only run inside the IDE, or can it actually be run as a standalone script that you could, like, from the command line?
Two things. Yeah, thank you very much for that question. Two things I forgot to mention. The first is Sakuli allows you to then compile the thing and distribute it as an executable, so someone can just double click on it and here's my slide presentation creator. And it's got a whole bunch of extra little things like pop up a dialog box to capture some entries. So you might say what's room 1 and what's room 2, and they type it in. And that's been done in a cross-platform way. The other thing I forgot to mention, which is amazingly awesome, is that rather than just click or find on the screen, you can say assert that this is on the screen, and that hooks into JUnit testing, right? I was involved with a project not so long ago that had so many use cases and was only really kind of, we were in a virtual kind of simulated environment. The only way to really test that the software is working was to do this kind of stuff on use cases through the GUI, and we automated the whole thing. And the great thing is we were still mucking around with the UI. We were moving buttons around, and Sakuli was still finding the button. Don't confuse this with an XY point-click thing. This is actually doing the fuzzy search to find the button wherever it happens to be on the screen and click the object. And that's why it's so much awesome than any other kind of automation tool I've seen. Thanks for the question.
Any more questions?
It's one over. We want to. I'll repeat the question. Does it launch the application? No, but I believe there is an open command, and the open basically sends the open command back down to the system. There's a standard Jython to, I think it's one in the OS library or something that says command open. So you can open applications. So that would be platform specific, obviously. The only other gotchas I did tell just the slightest little fib. I said it works on Mac OS and Linux. There are some variants of Linux, particularly with the newer GNOME and new implementations of the X windowing system, which just for whatever reason doesn't work. The other thing which to my huge frustration doesn't seem to work is when you connect it over RDP to a server remotely. Because one of the ideas I had for this is if you've got an API to anything, I can put it in the cloud and I can make all these awesome services. But for some reason, it doesn't recognize, I guess, screen 0 in the Linux world as being the one that's being presented over RDP. I'm sure there's a fix for that. I'm sure there's like click on screen represented by, which works for both the Linux problem and the RDP problem. But as a desktop tool, it's still freaking awesome. I just love watching. I could watch that all day.
All right, one more question. Last question, anyone?
Would this be a good tool to test how things appear in different browsers automatically?
Yes, there was someone very cleverly worked out how to play the Facebook Bejeweled or Bepuzzled game with Sakuli in a couple of lines of script. And so someone from that thought, well, you could launch this from a whole lot of different areas and see the representation was actually working kind of okay. I'll actually just quickly stop this script now because I'm sure a lot of people are going to want to check out Sakuli, but they'll forget the name. So if you want to see these slides and get all the URLs for all the goodness that is Web2Py and Sakuli and the one-line Python trick, which is searchable, cartesian.com/Python or that one, and I'm sure these slides will be made available as well. Thanks very much.